Let's talk now, shifting gears, into Todd Howard's eventual retirement. So there's been speculation. And by speculation, I mean some people on Twitter are saying and making stuff up that Todd Howard is planning on retiring. And apparently they add in a bunch of other stuff that he's disappointed with the reception of Starfield because it was his passion project, and hearing people have such mixed reactions has really depressed him and bummed him out. So he's expediting his retirement, and he's going to retire before Elder Scrolls 6. Let me just start out by saying no, that is not the case. This person was like memed and shamed into deleting their post, which is why I don't have it right now to show you. But I still wanted to talk about this because Todd Howard has in fact mentioned his retirement. He's talked about it in various interviews. People have asked him, like, you're kind of like the guy behind Bethesda Game Studios. When you leave, what does it look like? Like, how does the company work anymore? Does it work anymore? Like, can Bethesda Game Studios continue on? And it's a very valid question, honestly. You know, this is a collection of quotes from an interview he did with GQ, but there's all sorts of stuff that he says in it. This is before Starfield launched, so some of the stuff he says in here has not aged tremendously well. But yeah, it was a decision spurred on by the then trend of Marvel movies being announced in slates years ahead of even materializing. By the time the game is finally finished, probably 2028. So Todd in August was saying 2028 is when he's guesstimating it'll be done. But that's anyone's guess. It'll be closing in on 2 decades since the release of Skyrim. He's anticipating it takes until 2028. And he has said time and time again that when asked about his retirement, it's weird for me, Howard says, when asked how he feels when he contemplates retiring. Continuing on, quote, but that's a long, long way off. He will likely be 60 years old by the time The Elder Scrolls 6 comes out. Succession planning is kind of a constant thing. Quote, I want to do it forever. I think the way I work will probably evolve, but look at Miyamoto, end quote. The Nintendo icon turned 71 this year. He's still doing it, Todd says. So I get the impression that Todd isn't going to want to retire pretty much ever. He'll probably stay in a creative space and position. I don't think he's ever going to just walk away. I think he'll die doing what he's doing. But yeah, he's in his like mid 50s, I believe, right now. So yeah, there's a lot of really interesting stuff. And like with this, like, and then there's the Elder Scrolls 6, perhaps the only game to rival Grand Theft Auto 6 for sheer anticipation. I don't think that's true, especially after Starfield. I think the anticipation for Elder Scrolls 6 has actually dropped off a lot. Once again, he'll direct. It will mark his 4th time at the helm of the series. It's one he has overseen since 2002's The Elder Scrolls 3 Morrowind. The team announced the game 5 years ago on the same night as Starfield. It was a decision spurred on by the then trend. Marvel's, I already read that. Next, is there anything you can tell me about what you want to achieve with The Elder Scrolls 6? He said, quote, it's like, I don't want to answer, but I want to be polite. I will say that we want it to fill that role of the ultimate fantasy world simulator. He paused for a moment. And there are different ways to accomplish that given the time that has passed. What does that mean? I don't know. I think maybe they start to try to implement like generative AI stuff for NPCs to have actual conversations with you. I think they'll do some stuff like that. But Starfield has totally killed any confidence I have in them managing to pull all of this together in a significant way. Yeah, I don't see it. I don't see it happening. So with all this, the question is, what does his retirement look like? I mean, does he retire at all? Bazooka Tomato, hilarious name. Thank you for subbing with Prime, my friend. Appreciate you. I think, like I said, he doesn't retire ever. I think he stays in a creative overseeing position, but he's going to have to start promoting people within Bethesda to start directing games almost on his behalf. And then he can kind of supervise, keep people in check, but it's not him micromanaging every little detail. And it sounds like he's already tried to do that. There was the guy, I forget his name. Yeah, I'm spacing. We saw him in a video we watched last week, I think it was, maybe Monday. But he was a former Bethesda Game Studios employee, and he said Todd would hate it if he heard me say this, but he's still the ultimate decision maker. People ask questions and they work their way up to him, and he has final say. He doesn't like that. He would rather other people have the final say than just him, but that's effectively what it is. And I think it will always be like that until he steps away and forces the studio to be self-reliant. It's familiar because like even I have family members who run small businesses, and like one family member runs a small business and is actively frustrated that he can't like go on vacation for a week without his phone every hour, even often multiple times an hour, ringing with his employees asking him questions. Like, what do we do? This thing just happened. What do we do? Like, he can't leave for even a day without a flood of questions and people asking him to be the final decision maker. But and no matter how many people he's hired to try and help, or managers to kind of oversee, he at the end of the day is still at the top of the food chain. So people come to him asking for answers. And like, he's realized it, and I've told him the same thing. Like, I think it's going to be like that until you walk away, until you say, I'm done. Enough is enough. These guys are running the business now. I'm doing my own thing. That's that. And I think it's the same for Todd. I think he will always be the decision maker until he steps away and forces them to do it themselves. So I don't foresee Todd stepping away ever. I do think it's interesting to ask the question, like, let's say there was something that forced him to go away and do something else. Maybe it's a health emergency. Maybe it's just that he gets burnt out all of a sudden. I don't really foresee that happening, but let's just say, God forbid, something happens that forces him to leave and he's no longer heading up Bethesda. Does Bethesda Game Studios still work? Like, the whole company's kind of built around him. How does it function without him leading the way? Like, can they still sell their games without the "it just works" guy? You know, I'm not sure. He's going to be like the queen, just representing the company, but has no power. I think that's what they're starting to try and get him to do, as he's overseeing also like the Indiana Jones game and all of this other stuff. But as long as he's in that studio, people will still come to him asking questions and looking for answers. Or maybe Phil Spencer just replaces him. Well, no, what I'm speaking about specifically is the day-to-day operations of being the game director. What's been interesting is like Naughty Dog, for example, with Neil Druckmann is really fascinating, because Neil Druckmann, he, of course, directed The Last of Us, or co-directed The Last of Us with Bruce Straley, I think it is. And then for Uncharted 4, they co-directed it again. And then they shifted, and he now is only directing The Last of Us Part 2. And then he's moving in, and it seems like he's the only one directing their next big game. So like, you notice for Uncharted: The Lost Legacy, they didn't have Neil Druckmann leading the conversations or leading the interviews. Like, he didn't really do much of anything to hype this up or talk about it. It was all a secondary team within Naughty Dog that built this out, right? And it's because they wanted to establish independent teams that were able to make big decisions and do big projects by themselves without relying on Neil. It's also so funny to me. I remember playing this when it came out, and I was like, how did they get it looking so photorealistic? I remember just being baffled. And now I look at it and I'm like, the water looks kind of crappy. And like it's just so fascinating how over time we see better and better improvements in graphical technologies, and games that previously were like stunning are now like, oh yeah, that's pretty good. You know, it's just always fascinating. But we'll see what this looks like as time goes on, because I think even Naughty Dog is trying to figure out how this works. Do they have Neil stay in the leadership position, actually manually directing all of this stuff, or do they kind of transition and do some other stuff? You know, it's going to be really, really interesting to see how it continues to develop. And in the case of Bethesda Game Studios, I think Todd is at the center of it. I mean, it's like, does anybody really think Kojima, whatever it is, Kojima Studios, Kojima Entertainment, I forget what he calls it, but Kojima's new development studio, do you think that works without him? Probably not. I mean, in that case, it's named after him. But also, like, From Software, does that find success without Hidetaka Miyazaki? He didn't like manually direct himself Armored Core 6. He did participate in the pre-production process of like movement, prototyping stuff, but the actual direction comes from somebody else that he's worked with before. It's just Kojima Productions. Did you see Kojima hanging out with Jordan Peele? Yeah, I did. What that means, I have no idea. Emil Pagliarulo seems to be groomed to take over. Personally, like, I think Emil is a very sweet guy. I think he's nice. I think he means really well. I think him leading BGS could be a big mistake. And I mean that with all due respect and love, because he's very, very capable in a lot of ways. But a lot of things I've not liked about recent Bethesda games are directly tied back to him. The writing of Fallout 4 all goes back to him. A lot of the thematic choices for Starfield all go back to him. Some of the weird narrative decisions with like even Fallout 76 early pre-production stuff goes back to him. So I would not love that, but perhaps you're right. Maybe they are priming him to take over, but he's also an older gentleman. I think he's older than Todd. So not sure. Internet Mouse, thanks for coming by, my friend. Much love. Have a good day. Miyazaki's big contribution to From Software is that they have someone who cares deeply about the integrity of the games and not making live service Dark Souls. Yeah, and once they lose that cult of personality, does that still work? Like, can anybody else push the publisher around that way? Because Miyazaki's shown them that if he just, like, you give me the check, I'll make the good game, and it will sell well. That's it. You don't mess with me. You don't mess with my team. You give me the check, pays for everybody's salaries while we develop it. We build the game. It does well. Everybody's happy. That's Miyazaki at the end of the day. And they go along with it because they're like, yeah, he's the guy that made Bloodborne and Elden Ring and Dark Souls 3 and also Sekiro. Like, he knows what he's doing. Let him do his thing. But once he's gone, do they treat him like that? I'm not sure. He took my thing.